The luxury car's headlights cut through the darkness as it sped down the empty highway. Inside, baby Oliver Ashford wouldn't stop crying. His parents, Richard and Victoria Ashford, two of the richest people in the country, had tried everything. They'd given him milk, changed his diaper, sung lullabies, but nothing worked. The baby's cries grew louder and more desperate. "We need to stop," Victoria said, her voice shaking. "Something's wrong with Oliver." Richard pulled over near an old abandoned building. The area looked scary and empty. As soon as they stopped, Oliver's cries became even worse, almost like he was in pain. Then, something strange happened. The crying started to echo, like it was coming from two places at once. "Do you hear that?" Victoria whispered, holding Oliver tight. The echo was coming from below them, from underground. Richard grabbed a flashlight from the car and found a rusty metal door hidden in the weeds near the building. When he pulled it open, they saw old stone steps leading down into darkness. And the echo of crying was coming from down there. Before they could think about what to do, a young black girl, no more than 12 years old, appeared from behind the building. Her clothes were old and dirty, and she carried a small backpack. Her name was Zara Clifton, and she looked at the Ashfords with wise eyes that seemed too old for her young face. "Your baby here's another baby," Zara said quietly. "There's someone down there who needs help." Victoria held Oliver closer. "What do you mean? How do you know?" But Zara was already walking toward the metal door. "Babies can sense things adults can't. Your son is crying because another baby is crying underground. We need to hurry." Richard didn't know if he should trust this strange girl, but something about her calm voice made him believe her. Plus, Oliver's crying was getting worse. They had to do something. The three of them, plus baby Oliver, went down the dark stairs. The walls were wet and cold. Richard's flashlight showed the way, but it felt like they were going down forever. The sound of the other babies crying got louder with each step. "How did you know about this place?" Richard asked Zara as they walked. "I sleep near here sometimes," Zara said. "I heard the crying last night, but I was too scared to come down alone. When I saw your car stop and heard your baby crying the same way, I knew it was a sign." "You sleep outside?" Victoria asked, shocked. "Where are your parents?" "Gone," Zara said simply. "I take care of myself now." Victoria's heart hurt hearing this. Here she was, with everything money could buy, while this brave young girl had nothing and lived on the streets. At the bottom of the stairs, they found themselves in an old underground tunnel. Smelled bad like mold and water. The flashlight beam showed writing on the walls, old pipes, and puddles of water on the ground. The crying was very close now. They turned a corner and froze. There, in a small alcove in the wall, was a baby carrier. Inside was a tiny baby, maybe 3 months old, crying with all its strength. The baby's face was red, and its little fists waved in the air. "Oh my God!" Victoria gasped, running forward. She picked up the carrier and looked at the baby. It was a little girl, wearing a pink outfit that was now dirty and wet. Who would leave a baby down here? Richard pulled out his phone, but there was no signal underground. "We need to get her out of here and call the police." But Zara held up her hand. "Wait, look around first. This wasn't an accident." She pointed her small flashlight at the wall behind where the baby was. There, written in what looked like lipstick, were words, "I'm sorry. I had no choice. Please love her. Her name is Hope." Victoria started crying, holding little Hope close. Oliver, seeing the other baby, finally stopped crying. It was like he knew his job was done, that help had arrived. "Someone left her here on purpose," Richard said, his voice angry. "But why here? Why not a hospital or a fire station?" Zara walked around the small space, looking at everything carefully. She found a diaper bag tucked behind some pipes. Inside were 3 bottles of formula, some diapers, and a folded piece of paper. "There's a note," Zara said, handing it to Richard. Richard read it out loud. "To whoever finds Hope, I am her mother. I love her more than anything, but I'm in terrible danger. Bad people are looking for me, and they'll hurt her if they find her with me. I left her here because I knew this place connects to the old subway tunnels. I knew someone would eventually hear her cries and find her. Please protect her. Tell her I loved her. Tell her I'm sorry. Her father doesn't know about her. And he can never know. He's not a good man. Please keep her safe from him." The tunnel was silent except for the sound of water dripping somewhere in the darkness. Victoria looked down at Hope, who had finally stopped crying and was looking up at her with big brown eyes. "We have to help her," Victoria said firmly. "We can't just give her to the system. What if those bad people find her there?" "We should call the police," Richard said, but his voice wasn't sure. "And tell them what?" Zara asked. "That we found a baby underground? They'll ask a million questions. They'll put Hope in foster care. And if her mother is right about dangerous people looking for her, those people might have connections. They might find her." Victoria looked at Richard, then at Zara. "This girl is right. We need to think about this carefully." As they stood there, trying to decide what to do, Oliver started making small cooing sounds, like he was talking to Hope. Hope turned her head and looked at Oliver, and for a moment, she smiled. "They like each other," Zara said softly. "Maybe that's another sign." Richard ran his hand through his hair. He was used to making big business decisions, but this was different. This was about a human life, a baby who'd been abandoned in the worst way possible. "Let's get out of here first," he said. "We can think better above ground." They climbed back up the stairs. When they reached the surface, the fresh air felt wonderful after the damp tunnel. Richard's phone immediately buzzed with missed calls and messages, but he ignored them. Victoria sat in the back of the car with both babies. Oliver in his car seat and Hope in her carrier, which they'd buckled in carefully. Zara stood outside, her backpack on her shoulder, ready to disappear into the night. "Wait," Victoria said. "You're not going anywhere. Get in the car." "I don't think that's a good idea," Zara said. "You don't know me. You helped us find Hope," Victoria said. "You knew what was happening when we didn't. You're part of this now. Plus, you said you sleep on the streets. You're just a child. Let us help you." Zara looked uncertain. She'd been alone for so long, trusting no one. But something about Victoria's kind eyes made her want to say yes. "Just for tonight," Zara said, climbing into the car. As Richard drove toward their mansion on the other side of town, no one talked much. They were all thinking about the same things. What should they do about Hope? What danger was her mother running from? And could they really just take a baby they'd found and not tell anyone? When they arrived at the Ashford mansion, the size of it made Zara's eyes go wide. She'd never seen anything like it. The house had 3 floors, a huge garden, and lights that made it glow like a palace. Inside, Victoria took both babies upstairs to the nursery. They had plenty of space since they'd prepared a big room for Oliver. She cleaned Hope carefully, changed her into some of Oliver's spare clothes that were a bit big on her, and fed her a bottle. Hope drank hungrily, her little hands holding onto Victoria's finger. Downstairs, Richard showed Zara to a guest bedroom. It had a big bed, a private bathroom, and windows with thick curtains. To Zara, it felt like a hotel room from a movie. "Take a shower, get some rest," Richard said. "We'll talk in the morning." "Thank you," Zara said quietly. "I'll leave early. I don't want to be trouble." "You're not trouble," Richard said. "You're the reason we found Hope. That makes you important." After everyone cleaned up and got ready for bed, Victoria and Richard met in their bedroom. Both babies were asleep in cribs in the nursery, with a baby monitor on. "What are we going to do?" Victoria asked, sitting on the bed. "I don't know," Richard admitted. "The right thing would be to call the authorities. But that note from Hope's mother," she sounded terrified. "What if she's right? What if there are dangerous people looking for Hope? And what about Zara?" Victoria added. "That girl is living on the streets. She's so young. We can't just send her back out there." Richard paced the room. "This is complicated. We could get in serious trouble for not reporting this immediately." "I know," Victoria said. "But Richard, when I held Hope, when I read that note from her mother, I felt something. That woman made the hardest choice a mother could make. She left her baby in a scary place because she thought it was the only way to save her. We can't betray that sacrifice. Before Richard could answer, they heard a sound from the baby monitor. Not crying, but voices. They looked at each other in confusion. The babies couldn't talk yet. They rushed to the nursery and found Zara sitting on the floor between the two cribs, humming a soft song. Both babies were awake, looking at her with calm faces. I heard Hope fussing, Zara explained. I didn't want her to wake you up. My mother used to sing this song to me before she died. It always worked. Victoria sat down on the floor next to Zara. Tell me about your mother. Zara was quiet for a moment. She was kind like you. She died 2 years ago. Cancer. My father left when I was little. I went to foster care, but it was bad. The people were mean, so I ran away. I've been on my own since then. You're only 12, Victoria said, her voice breaking. You should be in school, playing with friends, being a kid. Life doesn't always give us what we should have, Zara said with a sad smile. But I've learned to survive. And tonight I helped save Hope. That feels good. Richard stood in the doorway watching them. Something was happening here, something he couldn't quite explain. It was like fate had brought them all together for a reason. The next morning, Richard had to make a decision. He called his most trusted lawyer, a man named Bernard Finch who'd worked for the Ashford family for 20 years. He explained the situation, everything about finding Hope and the mysterious note. Bernard was quiet for a long time on the phone. Richard, this is extremely serious. Legally, you should have called the police immediately. Every hour that passes makes it worse. I know, Richard said. But Bernard, what if we did call? What happens to Hope? She'd go into the Child Protective Services system, Bernard explained. There would be an investigation to find her mother. If they can't find her or if the mother's rights are terminated, Hope would be placed in foster care, then possibly adopted. And during all that time, if her mother was right about dangerous people, Hope would be vulnerable, Richard said. Yes, Bernard admitted. The system isn't perfect. Information can leak. People can be bribed or threatened. So what can we do? Richard asked. Is there any legal way to protect Hope and still do the right thing? Bernard thought for a moment. There might be one way. You could report finding her, but immediately file for emergency custody. Given your resources and standing in the community, a judge might grant it while the investigation proceeds. It wouldn't be adoption yet, but it would keep Hope in your care legally. Do it, Richard said. Whatever paperwork needs to be filed, file it today. What about the girl, Zara? Bernard asked. She's a witness to all this. She's also a child who needs help, Richard said firmly. I want to explore options for her too. Can we become her foster parents? That's a separate process but possible, Bernard said. Though it might look suspicious if you suddenly try to take in 2 children you just found. I don't care how it looks, Richard said. It's the right thing to do. After hanging up, Richard went to find Victoria. She was in the kitchen with Zara, teaching her how to make pancakes. Both babies were in bouncy seats on the counter, watching with wide eyes. Bernard's filing the paperwork, Richard told Victoria. We're reporting that we found Hope, but we're also filing for emergency custody. Victoria smiled with relief. Good. I couldn't bear the thought of giving her up. There's something else, Richard said. He looked at Zara. We'd like you to stay with us, officially. We want to become your foster parents. Zara dropped the spatula she was holding. What? Why? Because you deserve a home, Victoria said. Because you're smart and brave and kind. Because we have the space and resources to help you. And because we want to. Tears filled Zara's eyes. People don't just do nice things like this. What do you want from me? Nothing, Richard said. We just want to help. You helped us last night. Now let us help you. For the first time in 2 years, Zara let herself hope that maybe life could be good again. The next few days were a whirlwind. Police came to the mansion to take statements. Richard and Victoria explained everything, how they'd stopped because Oliver was crying, how Zara had appeared and led them to the tunnel, and how they'd found Hope. They gave the police the note and the diaper bag. The police officer in charge, Detective Raymond Frost, was a serious man with gray hair and tired eyes. He'd seen a lot in his career, but this case was unusual. "You should have called us immediately," Detective Frost said, but his tone wasn't too harsh. "However, I understand your concern for the baby's safety. The emergency custody filing helps your case. Have you found anything about Hope's mother?" Victoria asked nervously. "Not yet," Detective Frost said. "We're investigating. The tunnel you found her in connects to the old subway system that was abandoned in the 1980s. It's been used by homeless people and criminals over the years. We're checking security cameras in the area, but so far, nothing." "What about the dangerous people the mother mentioned?" Richard asked. Detective Frost's expression darkened. "That's what worries me. We're taking that threat seriously. For now, Hope is safe with you, and we'll keep this as quiet as possible. The fewer people who know about her, the better." After the detective left, Victoria felt a bit better. At least they were doing things legally now, even if it was a few days late. But that night, something happened that changed everything. Richard was in his study, working on some business papers, when his computer dinged with a new email. It was from an address he didn't recognize. Email protected. The email had no words, just an attachment. Richard's hand shook as he clicked it open. It was a photo of Hope's mother, or at least Richard assumed it was her. The woman in the picture was young, maybe 25, with long dark hair and Hope's same brown eyes. She was looking over her shoulder, fear clear on her face. And in the corner of the photo, barely visible, was a shadow of someone behind her. Richard's blood went cold. Someone had found them. Someone knew they had hope. His phone rang, making him jump. Unknown number. "Hello," Richard answered carefully. "Mr. Ashford," a man's voice said. It was cold and smooth, like ice. "I believe you have something that belongs to me." "Who is this?" Richard demanded. "That doesn't matter," the man said. "What matters is the baby you found. Her name is Hope, correct?" Richard's heart pounded. "I don't know what you're talking about." The man laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Don't play games. I know you found her in the tunnel. I know you filed for emergency custody. I know everything. If you're Hope's father, you can take it up with the police and the courts," Richard said, trying to sound brave. "I'm not her father," the man said, "but I need her nonetheless. See, Hope's mother stole something very valuable from me before she disappeared. She thought hiding the baby would keep her safe, but it won't. I will find that woman, and I will get back what she took. The baby is my insurance." "You're insane," Richard said. "I'm hanging up and calling the police." "Go ahead," the man said. "But know this. I have resources you can't imagine. I have people everywhere, even in the police department. And if you don't give me that baby willingly, I'll take her by force. You have 3 days to decide. I'll be in touch." The line went dead. Richard sat frozen, the phone still pressed to his ear. Everything Hope's mother had written in her note was true. There were dangerous people after her, and now they knew where Hope was. He ran upstairs to find Victoria and Zara. They needed to make a plan. They needed to protect Hope, no matter what it took. But when Richard reached the nursery, his blood turned to ice. The window was open, curtains blowing in the night breeze. Victoria was lying on the floor, unconscious. Zara was pressed against the wall, her eyes wide with terror. And both cribs were empty. Someone had taken Oliver and Hope. Richard's scream echoed through the mansion as he dropped to his knees beside Victoria. His hands shook as he checked her pulse. It was there, steady and strong. She was breathing, just unconscious. "Zara, what happened?" Richard shouted, his voice breaking with panic. Zara was trembling, tears streaming down her face. A man came through the window. He was wearing all black, even his face was covered. He sprayed something in Victoria's face and she just fell. I tried to stop him. I swear I tried, but he pushed me and grabbed both babies. He went back out the window so fast. Richard ran to the window and looked out. There was a rope hanging from the roof, swaying in the wind. On the ground below, he could see tire tracks in the grass where a vehicle had been parked. They were gone. He pulled out his phone and dialed 911 with shaking fingers. My children have been kidnapped. 2 babies. Please, we need help right now. While he gave the address to the emergency operator, Victoria started to wake up. She groaned and opened her eyes slowly, looking confused. Richard? What happened? Why am I on the floor? Then her eyes went wide with sudden memory. The babies. Where are the babies? They're gone, Richard said, his voice hollow. Someone took them. Victoria's scream was worse than anything Richard had ever heard. It was the sound of a mother whose children had been ripped away from her. She tried to stand but fell back down, still dizzy from whatever the intruder had sprayed in her face. Within 10 minutes, police cars filled the driveway, their red and blue lights flashing against the mansion's walls. Detective Frost arrived shortly after, his face grim. Tell me everything, he said, pulling out a notebook. Richard explained about the email, the phone call, and the man's threats. He showed Detective Frost the photo that had been sent. The detective's jaw tightened as he listened. This is connected to Hope's mother, Detective Frost said. This man, whoever he is, he's serious. He has resources and he's not afraid to break into a billionaire's home. That tells me he's either very powerful or very desperate. Or both, Zara said quietly from the corner. We need to find them, Victoria sobbed. They're just babies. Oliver is only 6 months old, and Hope is even younger. They need us. Detective Frost put a gentle hand on her shoulder. We will find them, Mrs. Ashford. I'm calling in the FBI. Kidnapping across state lines is federal jurisdiction, and with the threat level here, we need all the help we can get. Over the next hour, the mansion filled with police officers, FBI agents, and forensic teams. They dusted for fingerprints, collected evidence from the nursery, and interviewed everyone. The rope was analyzed, the tire tracks were photographed and measured, and technical experts started tracing the email and phone call Richard had received. But Richard felt helpless. All these people, all this technology, and his children were still out there somewhere with a dangerous criminal. Agent Sarah Huang from the FBI sat down with Richard and Victoria in the living room. She was a woman in her 40s with kind eyes but a serious expression. Mr. and Mrs. Ashford, I need you to think carefully. Did you see anything unusual in the days before this happened? Anyone watching the house? Strange cars in the neighborhood? Anything at all? Victoria shook her head, wiping her tears. Nothing. Everything was normal until we found Hope. That's the key, Agent Huang said. You found Hope 4 days ago. This man has been tracking her, probably tracking her mother too. When you filed for emergency custody, that became public record. Anyone looking would have found it. So this is my fault, Richard said bitterly. I should have kept her hidden. No, Agent Huang said firmly. You did the legal thing. This is the kidnapper's fault, no one else's. Now let's talk about the phone call. Did you recognize anything about the man's voice? An accent? Background noise? Richard closed his eyes, trying to remember. He sounded educated, calm. No accent that I could tell. I didn't hear any background noise, just his voice. And he said Hope's mother stole something from him. Agent Huang continued. Any idea what that could be? No, Richard said. The note she left didn't say anything about stealing. Zara, who had been sitting quietly, suddenly spoke up. What if it wasn't an object? Everyone turned to look at her. What do you mean? Agent Huang asked. The note said Hope's father doesn't know about her and can never know, Zara explained. What if the thing Hope's mother stole was information, like secrets or files or something? If this man is powerful and dangerous, maybe she found out something bad about him and took proof. Agent Huang's eyes lit up. That's good thinking. That would explain why he wants Hope. He thinks the mother will trade the information for her baby. But he took Oliver too, Victoria said. Why would he take our son? Insurance, Detective Frost said, walking into the room. Or maybe he grabbed both babies in the confusion. In the dark, with the mother unconscious, he might not have known which baby was which. Richard stood up suddenly. We need to draw him out. He said he'd contact us in 3 days. We can't wait that long. We need to do something now. Mr. Ashford, I understand your urgency, but we need to be smart about this, Agent Huang said. If we push too hard, he might panic and hurt the babies. She's right, Detective Frost added. Our best chance is to trace his communications and find him before the 3 days are up. We have people working on the email and phone call right now. But Richard wasn't listening anymore. He walked to the window and stared out at the dark night. Somewhere out there, his baby boy and little Hope were in the hands of a monster, and he felt powerless to save them. Victoria came and stood beside him, taking his hand. We'll get them back, she whispered. We have to believe that. Behind them, Zara sat curled up in a chair, guilt eating at her. If she hadn't led them to that tunnel, if they'd never found Hope, Oliver would still be safe. This was all because of her. As if reading her thoughts, Victoria turned and looked at Zara. This is not your fault, sweetheart. You saved Hope once. Now we'll save her again together. But even as she said it, Victoria's voice shook with fear. Because deep down, she knew the truth. They were dealing with someone who had no limits, no mercy. Someone who would stop at nothing to get what he wanted. And time was running out. The first 24 hours after the kidnapping were the longest of Richard's life. He didn't sleep, didn't eat, just paced the mansion waiting for any news. Victoria sat in the nursery, holding Oliver's favorite blanket and crying quietly. Zara stayed close to her, not knowing what else to do. The FBI had set up equipment in Richard's study to trace any calls that came in. Agent Huang had a whole team working around the clock, following every possible lead. But so far, there was nothing. The kidnapper had vanished like smoke. Detective Frost came by early in the morning with news. We traced the email. It went through 7 different servers in different countries. Whoever sent it knows how to cover their tracks. The phone call was made from a burner phone that's now turned off. We can't track it. Richard slammed his fist on the desk. There has to be something. He didn't just appear and disappear like a ghost. Someone must have seen something. We're checking all the security cameras in the area, Detective Frost said. We've got officers going door to door. We'll find something, Mr. Ashford. These people always make mistakes. If you're enjoying this story, please subscribe to the channel. Your support keeps us motivated and reminds us that our stories are making a difference in people's lives. But what if they didn't make a mistake? What if the kidnapper was too smart, too careful? Richard couldn't shake the fear that was eating him alive. Around noon, Victoria came downstairs. She looked terrible, her eyes red and swollen from crying. I want to make a public appeal, she said. On television. Maybe if the kidnapper sees how much we're suffering, he'll have mercy. Agent Huang shook her head gently. That's not a good idea, Mrs. Ashford. Public attention could make things worse. This man doesn't want publicity. He wants to stay in the shadows. Then what are we supposed to do? Victoria shouted. Just sit here and wait while our babies are out there somewhere, scared and alone? No one had an answer for her. That afternoon, something unexpected happened. Package arrived at the mansion. It was a small cardboard box with no return address. The FBI immediately treated it as evidence, X-raying it and checking it for explosives or dangerous materials. When they finally opened it, everyone's heart stopped. Inside was Oliver's baby blanket, the blue one with stars that he loved. And wrapped inside the blanket was a pacifier that belonged to Hope. There was also a note, written in typed letters. They're safe for now. Stop looking for me or that changes. Wait for my instructions. Victoria grabbed the blanket and held it to her face, breathing in Oliver's scent. Fresh tears poured down her cheeks. He's real, she whispered. This proves they're really out there. My baby touched this. Richard felt sick. The kidnapper was playing with them, showing that he had their children and could do whatever he wanted with them. At least we know they're alive, Agent Huang said, trying to sound positive. He's keeping them safe because he needs them. That's good news. For how long? Richard asked bitterly. How long until he gets impatient or angry? How long until he decides they're not useful anymore? Nobody answered that question. Zara had been quiet most of the day, but now she spoke up. Can I see the box? Agent Huang looked at Detective Frost, who nodded. Zara came closer and examined the cardboard box carefully. She looked at the address label, the tape, the way it was sealed. This was mailed from downtown, Zara said, pointing to the postmark. The post office on 5th Street. I know that area. I used to sleep near there sometimes. We already noted that, Agent Huang said. We're pulling security footage from the post office now. But look at the handwriting on the address, Zara continued. It's shaky, uncertain. This wasn't written by the kidnapper. He's too careful, too professional. Someone else addressed this box for him. Everyone leaned in to look. Zara was right. The address was written in slightly wobbly handwriting, like someone who wasn't used to writing or was nervous. Good eye, Detective Frost said. So the kidnapper had someone else mail this for him. That means at least 2 people are involved. Or he forced someone to do it, Richard said. Maybe someone at the post office or a homeless person he paid or threatened. We need to get that security footage as soon as possible, Agent Huang said, pulling out her phone. While they waited for the footage, Richard couldn't stop staring at Oliver's blanket. His son had held this just hours ago. Where was he now? Was he crying? Was he hungry? Did he know his parents were trying to find him? Victoria suddenly stood up. I need air. I can't breathe in here. She walked out to the garden and Zara followed her. The afternoon sun was warm, but Victoria felt cold all over. She sat on a bench near the rose bushes and stared at nothing. When I was living on the streets, Zara said quietly, sitting next to her, I used to see terrible things, bad people doing bad things to good people. I learned that the world can be cruel and unfair. That's not helping, Victoria said. But her voice wasn't angry, just tired. But I also learned something else, Zara continued. I learned that good people don't give up. They fight. They survive. And sometimes, when things seem darkest, that's when hope appears. That's why that baby's name is perfect. Hope. Because even in the worst situations, hope is what keeps us going. Victoria looked at Zara with tears in her eyes. You're so young, but you're so wise. How did you become so strong? I didn't have a choice, Zara said. When my mom died, I could have given up. But she taught me to keep fighting. She taught me that kindness matters, even when the world is cruel. That's why I helped you find hope that night. Because my mom would have wanted me to help. Victoria pulled Zara into a hug, and they both cried together. 2 people from completely different worlds, brought together by tragedy, finding comfort in each other. Inside the house, Agent Huang's phone rang. She answered it quickly, listened for a moment, and her face changed. We got the security footage, she announced. And you're not going to believe who mailed that package. Richard rushed over. Who? Show me. Agent Huang pulled up the video on her laptop. The footage showed the post office counter, and standing there, mailing the package, was a woman. But not just any woman. It was Hope's mother. She was alive, and she had been at the post office just 3 hours ago. The room erupted in chaos. Everyone started talking at once, asking questions, making theories. But Richard just stared at the screen, watching the footage over and over. Hope's mother looked terrified in the video. She kept glancing over her shoulder, her hands shaking as she paid for the postage. She wore a baseball cap pulled low and sunglasses, clearly trying to hide her face. But it was definitely her, the same woman from the photo the kidnapper had sent. She's working with him, Detective Frost said. She has to be. How else would she have the baby's things? No, Zara said firmly, coming back inside with Victoria. Look at her body language. She's scared. She's not working with the kidnapper. He has her too. Agent Huang rewound the footage and watched more carefully. The girl's right. Look here at the edge of the frame. See that shadow? Someone standing just out of view watching her. She's not alone. So the kidnapper forced her to mail the package, Richard said. But why? Why risk having her seen in public? Because he's proving a point, Victoria said quietly. He's showing us that he has control over everyone. The babies, their mother, everything. He's playing with us. Agent Huang froze the image on Hope's mother's face. We need to identify her. Real name, background, everything. If we know who she is, we can figure out who the kidnapper is and what she stole from him. I'll run facial recognition, another FBI agent said, already typing on his laptop. It'll take some time, but we'll get a match. The hours crawled by like days. Richard tried to stay busy, but there was nothing to do except wait. Victoria had finally fallen asleep on the couch, exhausted from crying. Zara sat on the floor nearby, watching over her like a guardian. Around midnight, the facial recognition came back with results. Agent Huang gathered everyone in the study. Her name is Diana Pruitt, Agent Huang announced, pulling up a photo on the screen. She's 26 years old, originally from a small town in Ohio. She worked as a legal secretary at a law firm here in the city until 6 months ago when she suddenly quit and disappeared. A legal secretary, Richard said. That fits with Zara's theory about her stealing information. She would have had access to confidential files. Exactly, Agent Huang said. The law firm she worked for is called Lennox and Associates. They handle cases for some very wealthy and powerful clients. Corporate law, estate planning, and some criminal defense. So Diana found something in those files, Detective Frost said. Something bad enough that someone is willing to kidnap babies to get it back. We need to talk to her employers, Richard said. Find out what cases she worked on, who she might have crossed. Agent Huang shook her head. We already tried. The law firm is refusing to cooperate. They're citing attorney-client privilege. Without a warrant, we can't force them to tell us anything, and getting a warrant will take time. Then we don't have time to waste, Richard said, standing up. I'm going there myself. Tonight. Mr. Ashford, that's not a good idea, Agent Huang warned. You need to let us handle this legally. My son has been missing for over 30 hours, Richard said, his voice hard. Every minute we waste is another minute he's in danger. I'm not sitting here anymore. Victoria woke up at the sound of raised voices. I'm coming with you, she said immediately. Both of you need to stay here in case the kidnapper calls, Detective Frost said. That's the smart play. But Richard was already grabbing his car keys. Zara, stay here with the agents. Victoria, let's go. Before anyone could stop them, Richard and Victoria were out the door and driving toward the law firm's downtown office building. It was nearly 1 in the morning, but Richard didn't care. He would break down the door if he had to. When they arrived at the tall glass building, the front doors were locked. Richard pressed the buzzer for the security desk. Building's closed, a voice said through the intercom. Come back during business hours. This is Richard Ashford. I need to speak with someone from Lennox and Associates immediately. It's an emergency. There was a long pause. Everyone knew the Ashford name. Richard was one of the richest men in the city. I'll call upstairs, the security guard said reluctantly. 10 minutes later, a sleek man in an expensive suit came down to the lobby. He was in his 50s with silver hair and cold eyes. His name badge read Gerald Lennox, senior partner. Mr. Ashford, I'm sorry about your situation, but I can't help you, Lennox said. Attorney-client privilege means I cannot discuss any employee or any case files. A woman who worked for you is being hunted by a dangerous criminal, Richard said. He's kidnapped 2 babies, including my son. If you know anything that could help us find him, you have a moral obligation to tell us. I have a legal obligation to protect my client's privacy, Lennox said coldly. Diana Pruitt was fired for stealing confidential documents. Beyond that, I can say nothing. Fired or quit? Victoria asked. The FBI said she quit. Lennox's expression flickered for just a moment. That's what we told people. We didn't want the scandal of admitting we'd been robbed. But yes, she was terminated when we discovered what she'd done. What did she steal? Richard demanded. I cannot say, Lennox repeated. Richard stepped closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. My 6-month-old baby is out there somewhere, probably crying for his mother. A tiny infant who's never spent a night away from home. If you know something that could bring him back and you don't tell me, I will make it my life's mission to destroy you and everything you've built. Do you understand me? For a moment, fear flashed in Lennox's eyes, but then his expression hardened again. Are you threatening me, Mr. Ashford? I'm promising you, Richard said. Lennox was quiet for a long moment, clearly wrestling with himself. Finally, he sighed. I can't tell you what she stole, but I can tell you this. Diana worked on a very sensitive case involving a real estate developer named Vincent Carmichael. He's powerful, connected, and from what I understand, not someone you want as an enemy. Where can I find him? Richard asked. I don't know, Lennox said. He stopped being our client after Diana disappeared. He was furious, threatened to sue us. We haven't heard from him since. What was the case about? Victoria pressed. Lennox shook his head. That's all I can say. If you want more, get a warrant. He turned and walked back toward the elevator, leaving Richard and Victoria standing in the lobby. Vincent Carmichael, Richard said. That's our kidnapper. It has to be. They rushed back to the car and drove toward the mansion. Richard called Agent Huang on the way and told her everything Lennox had said. We're running background on Carmichael now, Agent Huang said over the phone. But Richard, you need to be careful. If this is our guy, confronting him could put the babies in more danger. I don't care, Richard said. At least now we have a name. When they got home, Agent Huang was waiting with information pulled up on her computer. Vincent Carmichael's photo filled the screen. He was a handsome man in his 40s with dark hair and a cruel smile. He's a real estate developer, Agent Huang explained. But his business practices are questionable. There have been accusations of bribery, threats, even violence against people who got in his way. Nothing ever stuck, though. He's too smart, too connected. That's him, Richard said with certainty. That's the man who has my children. We can't prove it yet, Agent Huang warned. And even if we could, we don't know where he's keeping them. Suddenly, Richard's phone buzzed. New email. From the same anonymous address as before. With shaking hands, Richard opened it. The email contained a single photo. It showed both babies sleeping in car seats, Oliver sucking his thumb, Hope curled up with her tiny fist near her face. They looked peaceful, unharmed. Below the photo was a message. Beautiful children. It would be a shame if something happened to them. Tomorrow at noon, Diana will call you with instructions. Follow them exactly, or you'll never see these babies again. And Mr. Ashford, I know you've been asking questions. Stop. Now. The email ended with a sentence that made Richard's blood run cold. I'm always watching. Richard stared at the email for a long time before showing it to Agent Huang. The words felt like ice in his veins. I'm always watching. That meant Carmichael knew they'd gone to the law firm. He knew everything they were doing. He must have someone tracking you, Agent Huang said grimly. Or he's hacked your phone. We need to sweep this entire house for listening devices and get you a secure phone. Within the hour, a technical team arrived and began searching the mansion. They found 3 small listening devices, one in Richard's study, one in the master bedroom, and one in the nursery. Carmichael had been listening to everything they said since the kidnapping. These are professional grade, the tech specialist said, holding up one of the tiny bugs. Military-level equipment. This guy has serious resources. Richard felt violated and furious. Carmichael had been in his home, touching his things, invading his privacy. But worse than that, he'd been listening to Victoria cry for her baby. He'd heard every desperate conversation, every plan they'd made. That's how he knew we went to the law firm, Victoria said, her voice shaking. He heard us planning it. Which means he knows we identified him, Detective Frost added. That makes him more dangerous. Cornered animals are unpredictable. The rest of the night dragged on with painful slowness. Nobody slept. They all sat in the living room, drinking coffee and watching the clock tick toward noon when Diana was supposed to call. Zara had been quiet for hours, but now she spoke up. I've been thinking about something. The Carmichael has been listening to everything. He knows about me too. He knows I led you to Hope. What if he comes after me next? Agent Huang looked at Detective Frost. Neither of them had considered that possibility, but Zara was right. She was a witness, and she'd started this whole chain of events. We'll have officers watching you at all times, Detective Frost promised. You're safe here. But Zara didn't look convinced. She'd learned on the streets that nowhere was truly safe. As morning broke, Victoria made breakfast that nobody ate. Richard tried to review business emails but couldn't focus on anything except the clock. Each minute felt like an hour. At 11:30, Agent Huang got a call. She listened, her face growing pale, then hung up. Diana Pruitt's body was just found in an alley downtown, she said quietly. She's been dead for at least 12 hours. The room went silent. Victoria put her hand over her mouth, tears filling her eyes. But that's impossible, Richard said. We saw her on the security footage yesterday afternoon. She was alive. She mailed that package, then Carmichael killed her, Detective Frost said. She was a loose end. He doesn't leave loose ends. But the email said she would call at noon, Victoria said. If she's dead, who's going to call? Nobody had an answer. At exactly noon, Richard's new secure phone rang. Everyone gathered around as he answered on speaker. Mr. Ashford. It was Carmichael's voice, the same cold tone from before. I assume you've heard about Diana by now. Tragic, really. She was a troubled young woman who stole from me and paid the price. You monster, Victoria shouted. She was Hope's mother. Hope, Carmichael said, almost thoughtfully. What a ridiculous name for a baby. Diana was always too sentimental. That's why she had to go. What do you want? Richard demanded. You said Diana stole something from you. Tell us what it is and we'll get it back. Just give us our children. Carmichael laughed. You think it's that simple? Diana stole documents proving I bribed city officials to approve my construction projects. Documents showing I paid people to demolish buildings with families still inside them. Documents that could send me to prison for life. She hid them somewhere, and I want them back. We don't have them, Richard said. We don't know where they are. I know you don't have them, Carmichael said. But you're going to find them. See, Diana left clues. She was clever like that. Before she died, she told me she'd hidden information about the document's location in places only someone who cared about her baby would look. What does that mean? Victoria asked. Figure it out, Carmichael said. You have 24 hours. Find the documents and bring them to me, or I'll kill both babies. And Mrs. Ashford, don't test me. I've killed before, and children are no exception. The line went dead. Everyone stared at each other in shock and horror. They had 24 hours to find documents that Diana had hidden using clues they didn't understand. Places only someone who cared about her baby would look, Agent Huang repeated. What could that mean? The diaper bag, Zara said suddenly. We found a diaper bag with Hope in the tunnel. Did anyone search it thoroughly? Detective Frost pulled up the evidence photos on his laptop. The diaper bag had been photographed and catalogued. Inside were bottles, diapers, wipes, and Diana's note. Wait, Victoria said, leaning closer to the screen. Look at this bottle. The label is peeling off at the corner. They retrieved the actual diaper bag from evidence storage and examined the bottle carefully. Victoria peeled back the label completely. Underneath, written in tiny letters on the plastic, was an address. 1247 Riverside Apartments, Unit 3B. That must be where Diana was living, Richard said. Within minutes, they were in cars heading to the address. Police and FBI agents surrounded the building while Richard, Victoria, Agent Huang, and Detective Frost went up to apartment 3B. The door was unlocked. Inside, the apartment was small and messy, like someone had left in a hurry. Baby things were scattered everywhere. A crib in the corner, bottles in the sink, tiny clothes on the floor. This breaks my heart, Victoria whispered, looking around. Diana lived here with Hope, all alone, terrified and on the run. Search everything, Agent Huang ordered. We're looking for documents or information about where Diana hid them. They tore the apartment apart. They looked under the mattress, inside the crib, behind picture frames, in every drawer and closet. But they found nothing. "There has to be something here," Richard said desperately. Carmichael said she left clues. Zara had been quiet, looking around the apartment with thoughtful eyes. She walked over to a small bookshelf in the corner. Most of the books were baby care guides and parenting books. But one book stood out. It was a children's story book called Hope and the Magic Garden. "Hope," Zara said, pulling out the book. Like the baby's name. She opened it and papers fell out. Bank statements, emails, photographs, and legal documents. Everything showing Carmichael's crimes in detail. Bribery, corruption, even evidence of 3 murders he'd committed to protect his secrets. "This is it," Agent Huang said, carefully gathering the papers. "This is enough to put Carmichael away forever. So we give it to him and get the babies back," Victoria said. But Agent Huang shook her head. "If we give him these documents, he'll destroy them and kill the babies anyway. We need a different plan." "What plan?" Richard demanded. "We only have 24 hours. Before anyone could answer, Richard's phone rang again. "Carmichael." "I know you found the documents," Carmichael said. "I've been watching Diana's apartment. Bring them to the old warehouse on Miller Street tonight at midnight. Come alone, Mr. Ashford. Just you. If I see any police, the babies die. If you try to bring copies or fake documents, the babies die. Do you understand?" "Yes," Richard said through clenched teeth. "Good," Carmichael said. "I'll see you at midnight." Richard looked at Agent Huang and Detective Frost. "I'm going, and I'm bringing those documents. I don't care about putting him in prison. I only care about getting Oliver and Hope back safely." "Richard, if you give him those documents, he wins," Agent Huang argued. "He'll kill you and the babies to cover his tracks." "Then what do you suggest?" Richard shouted. "Because my son has been gone for almost 2 days, and I can't take another minute of this." The room fell silent. Everyone knew Richard was right. They were out of time and out of options. And somewhere across the city, in a dark room, 2 babies slept, unaware that their lives hung in the balance. The hours until midnight crawled by like a nightmare that wouldn't end. Richard sat in his study, staring at the documents that could save or doom his son. Agent Huang and Detective Frost argued about the best way to handle the exchange, but Richard had already made up his mind. He was going alone, and he was giving Carmichael whatever he wanted. Victoria came in and sat beside him, taking his hand. "I know what you're thinking, and I agree. Nothing matters except getting Oliver and Hope back." "Agent Huang thinks I'm signing our death warrant," Richard said quietly. "Maybe," Victoria said. "But what choice do we have? If we don't show up, he kills them. If we bring the police, he kills them. At least this way, there's a chance." Zara appeared in the doorway, looking small and scared. "I want to come with you." "Absolutely not," Richard said immediately. "This is too dangerous." "Diana left those clues for someone who cared about Hope," Zara said. "I care about Hope. I found her first. I should be there to bring her home." "Zara, you're 12 years old," Victoria said gently. "We can't put you in danger." "I've been in danger my whole life," Zara said, her voice stronger now. "Living on the streets, you learn things. You learn how to read people, how to see things others miss. I might be able to help." Richard looked at her determined face and saw something he recognized. The same fierce protectiveness he felt for Oliver. "You really care about that baby, don't you?" "She's innocent," Zara said simply. "She didn't ask to be born into this mess. Neither did Oliver. They deserve a chance to grow up safe and loved. I never had that, but they can." The words hit Richard hard. Here was a child who'd lost everything, who'd survived on her own with nothing, and all she wanted was to help save 2 babies she barely knew. It made him ashamed of ever taking his wealth and privilege for granted. "Okay," Richard said, and Victoria looked at him in shock. "But you stay in the car. You don't get out no matter what happens. And if things go wrong, you drive away and get help. Promise me." Zara nodded. "I promise." Agent Huang was furious when she found out, but Richard wouldn't budge. I'm not asking for permission. I'm doing this my way. At least let us put a wire on you, Agent Huang begged, so we can hear what's happening. He'll check for that, Richard said. He's too smart. Then let us set up a perimeter far enough away that he won't see us, Detective Frost suggested. We won't interfere unless things go bad. Richard finally agreed to that. He knew they'd probably follow him anyway, but at least this way everyone was being honest about it. At 11 o'clock, Richard and Zara got into his car. Victoria hugged them both tightly, tears streaming down her face. Bring our baby home, she whispered to Richard. I will, Richard promised. I'll bring them both home. The drive to Miller Street felt surreal. The city was quiet at this hour, just a few cars on the road and streetlights casting orange shadows. Zara sat in the passenger seat, clutching her backpack, her eyes alert and watchful. Are you scared? Richard asked her. Terrified, Zara admitted. But being scared never stopped me before. When you have nothing to lose, fear becomes just another feeling you push through. You're not alone anymore, Richard said. After tonight, win or lose, you're part of our family. Victoria and I have already talked about it. We want to adopt you officially if you'll have us. Zara's eyes filled with tears. Really? Really? Richard said. You deserve a home, Zara. You deserve people who love you. We want to be those people. For a moment, Zara couldn't speak. Then she wiped her eyes and nodded. Okay, but first, let's get those babies back. They arrived at the warehouse at 11:45. It was an old brick building near the river, abandoned for years. Broken windows stared down like empty eyes. The area was deserted, just rusted machinery and overgrown weeds. Remember, Richard said to Zara, stay in the car. Lock the doors. If I'm not back in 30 minutes, or if you hear anything bad, you drive away and call Agent Huang. I remember, Zara said. Richard took the documents and walked toward the warehouse. The front door was open, hanging on broken hinges. Inside, it was dark except for a single light in the back of the building. Richard's footsteps echoed on the concrete floor as he walked toward the light. His heart pounded so hard he could hear it in his ears. In the center of the lit area stood Vincent Carmichael. He was even more handsome in person than in his photos, wearing an expensive suit like he was attending a business meeting instead of a kidnapping exchange. Next to him were 2 car seats with sleeping babies inside. Oliver and Hope. Richard's breath caught in his throat. His son looked so small, so vulnerable. Both babies appeared unharmed, sleeping peacefully like nothing was wrong. Mr. Ashford, Carmichael said with a cold smile. Right on time. I appreciate punctuality. Give me my children, Richard said, his voice shaking with controlled rage. First, the documents, Carmichael said. All of them. And don't even think about lying to me. I know exactly what Diana had. Richard held up the folder. It's all here. Every piece of evidence she collected. Now give me the babies. Carmichael laughed. You really think it's that simple? That I'll just hand them over and let you walk away? We had a deal, Richard said. Deals mean nothing to me, Carmichael said. I'm a businessman, Mr. Ashford. I understand leverage. Those documents are leverage, yes. But you know what's better leverage? Dead witnesses. Richard's blood ran cold. You're going to kill us anyway. Of course I am, Carmichael said casually. You, the babies, that little homeless girl in your car. I know she's out there. Did you really think I wouldn't notice? Richard's heart stopped. Zara. But first, Carmichael continued, I want to watch you suffer a bit more. You see, I know what it's like to lose everything. 10 years ago, I lost my wife and daughter in a fire. A fire that was set by a business rival. I couldn't prove it, couldn't get justice. So I learned that in this world, you take what you want and eliminate anyone who stands in your way. I'm sorry about your family, Richard said carefully, but these babies didn't do anything to you. They're innocent. So was my daughter, Carmichael said, his voice suddenly full of rage. She was only 4 years old, and nobody cared. Nobody helped me. The police said it was an accident. But I knew the truth. Richard realized he was dealing with someone who'd been broken by tragedy and twisted into a monster. There was no reasoning with him, no appealing to his mercy. "Give me the documents," Carmichael demanded, pulling out a gun. Richard slowly walked forward and handed over the folder. Carmichael flipped through it quickly, checking that everything was there. Then he smiled. "Perfect. Diana was thorough, I'll give her that. Too bad she had to die for it." "You killed Hope's mother," Richard said. "That baby will never know her mother because of you." "That baby won't know anything," Carmichael said, raising the gun, "because she won't live long enough to have memories." Outside in the car, Zara watched through the window. She couldn't hear what was being said, but she could see Carmichael holding a gun. Her promise to Richard echoed in her mind. Stay in the car, drive away if things went bad. But Zara had learned something important living on the streets. Sometimes promises had to be broken to save lives. She quietly got out of the car and crept toward the warehouse. She'd spent 2 years sneaking around the city unseen. She knew how to be invisible. Inside, Richard tried to keep Carmichael talking. "The FBI knows I'm here. They're watching right now. You can't get away with this." "I've gotten away with worse," Carmichael said. "I own half the judges in this city and a third of the police force. By tomorrow, this will be ruled a tragic accident. Desperate billionaire tries to rescue his son. Things go wrong. Everyone dies. Very sad." "Why the babies?" Richard asked desperately. "Just let them go. They can't identify you. They won't remember any of this." "Because I want you to hurt the way I hurt," Carmichael said. "I want you to know what it's like to lose a child. And then I want you to die with that pain." He pointed the gun at Oliver. Richard screamed and lunged forward, but Carmichael was faster. He fired, and Richard felt burning pain in his shoulder as the bullet hit him. He fell to the ground, clutching his wound. "That was a warning," Carmichael said. "The next one goes into the baby." But before Carmichael could fire again, something hit him hard from behind. Zara had found a metal pipe outside and swung it with all her strength at the back of his knees. Carmichael stumbled and dropped the gun. "Run!" Zara shouted at Richard. Richard ignored the pain in his shoulder and dove for the babies. He grabbed both car seats and ran toward the door while Zara kept hitting Carmichael with the pipe, trying to keep him down. But Carmichael was strong. He caught the pipe on Zara's next swing and twisted it out of her hands. Then he grabbed her by the throat. "You little pest," he snarled. "You should have stayed in the gutter where you belong." Zara couldn't breathe. She clawed at his hands, but he was too strong. Her vision started to go dark. Then she heard voices, lots of voices, and suddenly the warehouse was full of people. FBI agents and police officers swarmed in from every entrance. Someone tackled Carmichael and he let go of Zara. She fell to the ground, gasping for air. "We got him," Agent Huang shouted. "Carmichael, you're under arrest for kidnapping, attempted murder, and about a dozen other charges." Detective Frost helped Richard to his feet. "We heard the gunshot. Couldn't wait any longer." Richard didn't care about any of that. He looked down at the 2 car seats he was holding. Oliver and Hope were both awake now, crying from all the noise and commotion. But they were alive. They were safe. Victoria came running into the warehouse and threw her arms around Richard, careful of his wounded shoulder. Then she took Oliver out of his car seat and held him tight, sobbing with relief. "My baby! My sweet baby!" she cried, covering his face with kisses. Agent Huang helped Zara to her feet. "That was incredibly brave and incredibly stupid," she said. "But you saved their lives." Zara's throat hurt from being choked, but she managed to smile. "I told you I could help." Paramedics arrived and checked everyone over. Richard's shoulder wound wasn't serious. The bullet had gone through clean. Zara's throat was bruised but not damaged. Both babies were completely unharmed, just scared and hungry. Carmichael was dragged away in handcuffs, still shouting threats and curses. Detective Frost assured Richard that with all the evidence, plus the attempted murder charges, Carmichael would never see freedom again. As they all sat in the ambulance, Richard held Oliver while Victoria held Hope. Zara sat between them, and for the first time in 2 years, She felt like she was part of something. Part of a family. What's going to happen to Hope now? Zara asked quietly. Victoria and Richard looked at each other. They'd been thinking about the same thing. Her mother is dead, Victoria said. She has no other family that we know of. And we already filed for emergency custody. We could adopt her, Richard said. Give her the life Diana wanted for her. A safe home, parents who love her, a future. And a sister, Victoria added, smiling at Zara. If Zara agrees to be adopted too. Zara's eyes filled with tears again. You'd really do that? Take in both of us? You're already family, Richard said. This just makes it official. 3 months later, the Ashford family sat in a courtroom. Judge Patricia Hammond looked down at them with kind eyes. I've reviewed all the documents in this case, Judge Hammond said. The circumstances are unusual, to say the least. But it's clear that these children have bonded with you, and you've provided them with excellent care. Richard and Victoria Ashford, I'm granting your petition to adopt Hope Diane Ashford and Zara Marie Ashford. Congratulations. The courtroom erupted in applause. Victoria cried happy tears while Richard held both babies, who were now almost a year old and sitting up on their own. Zara stood between them, wearing a new dress and the biggest smile anyone had ever seen on her face. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited with cameras and questions. The story of the billionaire's baby being found underground, the kidnapping, and the dramatic rescue had become national news. But Richard just smiled and said, "Today is about family. We found each other in the darkest circumstances, but love and kindness brought us together. That's all that matters." As they drove home in their car, Oliver and Hope babbling in the back seat, Zara looked out the window at the city she'd once wandered alone and frightened. Everything had changed. She had a home now. She had parents who loved her. She had a brother and sister. "What are you thinking about?" Victoria asked from the front seat. "Hope," Zara said. How Diana named her baby Hope even when she was running for her life. Even when everything was terrible, she still believed in hope. And she was right. Hope saved all of us. Richard reached back and squeezed Zara's hand. "You saved all of us. If you hadn't led us to that tunnel that first night, we never would have found Hope. And if you hadn't been brave in that warehouse, Carmichael might have killed us all. We saved each other," Zara said wisely. "That's what families do." And she was right. They had saved each other. The billionaire and his wife who'd had everything except perspective. The baby who'd been abandoned to protect her. And the homeless girl who'd had nothing but courage. Together, they'd become something more than the sum of their parts. They'd become a real family, built not on blood or money, but on kindness, empathy, and hope. As they pulled into the driveway of the mansion that was now truly home to all of them, the setting sun painted the sky in shades of orange and gold. Inside, dinner was waiting. Toys were scattered across the floor. Photo albums waited to be filled with new memories. It wasn't a perfect ending because real life never is. There would still be hard days ahead. Hope would someday ask about her birth mother, and they would tell her the truth about Diana's sacrifice. Zara would sometimes have nightmares about her time on the streets. Oliver would grow up knowing his early life had been touched by danger. But they would face it all together as a family. And that made all the difference. Victoria carried the babies inside while Richard helped Zara with her backpack. As they crossed the threshold, Zara paused and looked back at the street one last time. That life was behind her now. Ahead was love, safety, and endless possibilities. "Come on, sweetheart," Victoria called. "Dinner's getting cold." Zara smiled and closed the door on her past, ready to embrace her future. And somewhere, in whatever place souls go after death, Diana Pruitt smiled. Her daughter was safe. Her sacrifice hadn't been in vain. Hope had found hope, and that was all any mother could ask for. The end. Thank you for watching. If you found this story engaging, we invite you to share your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective adds value to the conversation. To stay updated with future stories exploring themes of race, inequality, and the unexpected choices that shape lives, please consider subscribing to this channel. Your support helps us continue creating meaningful and thought-provoking content.